Hello, everyone. It's Lydia with the Global Travel Junkie podcast and YouTube channel. And today I'm excited to introduce you to our next guest. I'm sitting here with Shaun Stanley with Stanley Safaris. Hi, Shaun.
Hi, Lydia. How are you?
I'm doing great. Where are you in the
Good.
world today? Where are you
Uh,
sitting?
I am in the beautiful Cape Town in South Africa. That's where I call home. Um, Voted one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So we're very privileged to live here.
Oh, well, that's a destination spot on its own, right?
Yeah, exactly. Must
Yes.
must do, must do.
Yes, awesome. Well, hopefully one day I'll get to Africa myself. So today we're going to talk to Shaun, and he's going to tell us all about the Stanley Safaris and how they custom tailor safaris that are exactly what you're looking for. So without further ado, let me go ahead and ask Shaun, would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit? Give us a little background about where you came from and
Sure.
what you've been doing up until now.
So I was very lucky to grow up in South Africa. I grew up in Durban, which is up the East Coast, and very fortunate to have parents that love to travel and go on safari. So from a very young age, I got to explore the whole of Southern Africa. And this was back in the 80s and 90s before there were any luxury camps and lodges and kind of luxury tourism industry. So we got to explore some amazing places way off the beaten track. Um, Camp in the remote areas of Namibia and on islands in the Okavango Delta in Botswana. And those memories stayed with me my whole life, and kind of shaped my future. So when I finished school, I studied to become a safari guide, and I worked as a guide for a year in Zimbabwe and Zambia, taking guests on walks and game drives and horse riding and all those amazing things that we can do out here in Africa. And then I went over to the UK, and I lived in the UK for 12 and a half years. But while I was there, I was traveling around, but my heart was always in Africa. That's where I'm from, and that's where my heart is based. So I started looking around and found a job in a tourism company. And we designed wildlife trips around the world. And that was my first taste into this sort of industry. In 2013, I moved back to South Africa. I'd had enough of the UK, moved back to South Africa, and we settled here in Cape Town. And yeah, just carried on in the industry. Three and a bit years ago now. So during COVID, I started Stanley Safaris, using my extensive knowledge of having traveled across Africa, my knowledge of having worked in the industry before. And I'm lucky to have worked in various aspects of the industry, from guides to traveler to lodge operator, sales and marketing. So I have quite a wide range of the industry, and use that to kind of go, let's do something different with planning trips out to Africa for my guests. And that's where we are today, 3 and a bit years later, and haven't looked back and loving what I do.
That's awesome. And what comes to mind as you're talking is, I mean, the network that you have been able to build up for all the years that you've been. So really curating the best of the best, right? And that's what you do with Stanley Safari. So let's still dive in a little deeper. I want the audience to understand what type of safaris and where are you going and what are you offering? And then we'll just ask individual questions after that.
So, going back to your comment about the networking, in what I do, that networking is extremely important. And over the years, I've built up really strong relationships with a lot of the owners of camps and lodges. And it's part of our ethos that we only work with privately owned camps and lodges and hotels. We stay away from the big corporate hotel chains where you don't get the same attention to detail and the personal service. So we're very selective in terms of who we partner with. And we know that by partnering with those particular camps and lodges, we're going to send our guests to the best places for the wildlife. They're going to get the most amazing guides and service within the camps. But something that's very, very important for us is the ethos of each of the properties and their commitment to the local conservation and community projects. So we know that by sending our guests to these particular camps, the money is going back into local community and local conservation projects and sustainable, methods in terms of the camps that they're operating, but who they're employing, and then the projects with working with the local communities. So using all of that, we really get to know who our guests are. I spend a lot of time talking to my guests on the phone and understanding who they are, what they enjoy doing when they travel. A lot of my guests are first timers to Africa, so they don't have a very big idea in terms of what to expect. So,
or what
I
to
try and
ask
get
for.
exactly, yeah. I hear it so often, guests saying that we've been on the internet and it's just there's so much information out there. It's really overwhelming, and that's the thing with Africa is every country is completely different. Every country has something different to offer it, and if you don't know where to look and what to look for, you just go down this rabbit hole and it becomes a complete nightmare in terms of trying to understand everything. So I try and speak to my guests and understand who they are, what they enjoy doing when they're traveling. Are they active people? Do they like their food and their wine? Are they just wanting to go and relax? The more information I can get from them, the better. And then from there, I start to design an itinerary for them that is specific to them. We don't have any set packages that we just send out. We speak to everybody, we get to know who they are, and then we design something specific to them. And there are so many different possibilities. Africa is incredible. And as I said, every country is completely different. And within the country, there's different things to see and do. And everybody is different. So I'd find it's impossible just to send out a set package to everybody, one size fits all approach. That's not what we do. And by getting to know my guests, we really tailor something specific to them.
What comes to mind, it's like the difference between, do you want to walk to the gorillas or do you want to drive to the gorillas and see them at a distance? Whether you can have, I saw you have walking tours. And so I'm thinking there's the Jeep option or there's the walk with the animals option, right? So,
we're very much about experience, and I try and push the comfort levels of my guests a little bit. When people think they're going to go walking and then you've got cheetah or elephants and lions around, then it does make people a little bit nervous. But I try and encourage all my guests to try as much as possible. There's more to Africa than the big five, and everybody has in their mind that they have to see the big five: your lion, your leopard, elephant, buffalo, and rhino, and tick those boxes. But there's so much more to Africa, and there's more to Africa than just sitting in a Jeep and being driven around and seeing the animals. So we do a lot of things like walking safaris, like helicopter safaris, cultural experiences, canoeing, honeymoons, beaches. We try and get our guests to do as much as possible when they're out on safari and in Africa. The landscapes are incredible. Like behind me here, this is the Okavango Delta in Botswana, which is an amazing wetland. Behind you, you're in the Serengeti in Tanzania, these amazing grasslands and acacia trees. We try and encourage our guests to spend time in a place, not to rush around too much, but then while they're there, really kind of get under the skin of the country, get to know the people, and then try the different experiences. Try a walking safari, push your comfort levels a little bit. And you're going to come away completely blown away by what Africa has to offer.
Okay, good. So I understand it's very custom tailored, and that's the term they're using these days is bespoke, right?
Yes.
But it just means custom tailored for you. So that's something that you focus on. So we understand that. And I want to ask about specific safaris later in the podcast. But first, I want to talk about, if I wanted to come to your safari, tell me what that experience is. If I need to just get to the airport and from there, what happens? Like, let's understand for the listener, what do I have to do and what are you doing for me?
So we try and take care of as much as possible, as much of the legwork as possible, and take away that stress from our guests. So the process that we go through is, once I receive an inquiry or an interest from somebody, I take about 10 days to 2 weeks, kind of going backwards and forwards after the initial call, designing an itinerary. And what that looks like is typically from the time you arrive into Africa until the time you leave Africa. We take care of everything in between. So you'll be met at the airport, you'll be assisted with your immigration, you'll be handed over to somebody who will then transfer you through to the hotel. We do all your hotel reservations. in places like Cape Town, we do your restaurant reservations for you as well if you want. We organize all your tours, internal flights, the lodging, everything is taken care of while you're in Africa. And that's the initial package that we put together. Once we've made the tweaks and you're happy with what we've presented to you, you're happy with the price, you're happy with what we're offering, we then start to go ahead and look at availability, check space, and then put that on hold. Then we start looking at the international flights separately to that. And nowadays, it's very easy for people to book international flights online themselves. They've got their points, they earn points by booking on their credit cards and things like that. So a lot of my guests book their international flights themselves. But I'm always there to assist and advise, and we look at flights beforehand, make sure they work with the itinerary, and then they go ahead and book. But I also do book international flights for guests that want me to handle everything. We also take care of that as well.
That brings to mind, and I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going to ask, but you said so are you literally like meeting in every destination? Are you literally the tour person, or do you have staff and that it's your company and then you have staff that meet them and carry them through the experience? What is Stanley Safaris?
Yeah. So I don't personally do all of that sort of stuff.
Okay.
When my guests are in Cape Town, I make an effort to go through and meet with them and have a coffee and just put a face to the emails and WhatsApps and phone calls.
Okay.
But no, it basically comes down
to
our partners. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we work with partners around Africa, around Southern and East Africa, and they specialize in the transfers. They specialize in wine tours. And I've selected those by having met them and known them through my years in the industry.
Yes, years.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
got it.
It's quite a complicated thing putting an itinerary together, all the logistical parts, the transfers, the meets, the internal flights, all that sort of stuff. It is quite a complex thing to do, but it's fun. I enjoy doing it.
Well, and I would say that I would much rather trust someone who's lived in the continent than to hire a travel agent who has been on it once and hasn't been able to actually know the locals, know what's happening, like what's up to
Correct.
date. And it's your network that keeps you informed of what's good and what to, be aware of and how to adjust, right? Based on like
Correct.
conditions, right?
Booking a safari is very different to booking a city hotel. If you're booking a city hotel in New York, for example, you can book in the center of town and you're going to have access to all the major sites. Booking a safari lodge, you have to book the right camp for you. You have to book the right location for the camp, depending on the time of the year, depending on what you're wanting to do, depending on what you're wanting to see. And so that sort of knowledge only comes through being here, experiencing it, having worked with different properties. It is a very specialist thing.
And you know what? I've been in marketing for a long time, but what comes to mind is just because something has a reputation, it's all dependent on the employees. So you need that long-term relationship experience to know that it's consistently been a 5-star. It's not a new 5-star, so I think that I'm sure y'all have that experience with all your years of experience. So just something to think about. So is there, something I did with another guest I want to do with you is, can you help us understand what to watch out for when you're booking a safari? For instance, and I'm not trying to trash talk anyone, but what I want to say is you need to be asking this question. You need to be asking that question. And of course, obviously, you're going to be offering all these things that you're listing, but be careful of, I'll give you an example. Like another guest was letting us know that not every operator is sustainable. So if you care about how they treat the ecological, environment, then you need to be asking these questions to make sure that they match with your beliefs and values about how you want to travel. So can you just give us an idea of like some of the questions we need to be asking you so that we know that it's important that you offer those things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. tricky question. From my point of view, and something that I think frustrates me the most in this industry is that Africa is about the privately owned camps and lodges, the locally owned camps and lodges, and that is very important. We've got the big hotel chains that are moving in and kind of opening up nice big lodges and things like that. And a lot of people get caught up in that brand, international brand, not necessarily realizing that the money they're spending is going out of the country and it's not being kept in the country. And I think that's quite important.
The
is
local
making sure
economy.
Correct. Yeah. And in Africa, it's very important. There's a lot of poverty in Africa. And when you have villages on the outskirts of these national parks, they need to understand the value of the wildlife. Otherwise, that's where your poaching problems start to arise from. And if the money isn't staying in the country, in the area, and it's leaving and going outside, then that's a big problem. That's when the poverty is going to increase. The local villagers aren't going to see the value of the wildlife, and they're going to go back and start hunting again. So try and work with an operator that knows what they're talking about. Unfortunately, this whole conservation and community blurb and marketing spiel blurb is too often used and not done on the ground.
Acted on, yeah.
Correct, yeah. So make sure, ask about it. A lot of the responsible properties and that will have documents. They will have information about the projects that they're supporting, that they're working with, where the money is going. For me, a very big thing is local employment. There's nothing worse than walking into this lovely lodge or camp and you've got an expat that's running this camp and you're like, I need to know a bit more about the local culture and the local people and see that support. So for me, local employment is a very big thing.
That's great.
So yeah, in Africa, one person is supporting 7 or 8 different family members back home. And so that one job in the lodge is a hugely important thing for conservation going forward. So make sure that you are booking with a responsible tour operator and that they are using responsible properties on the ground, and try and stay away from the big brands, try and stay away from the big corporate hotels. Safari is a very intimate experience. You can see in the vehicle behind you there, you've got, 4 people on a vehicle going and you're tracking these cheetah through the Serengeti. It's an intimate experience. It's not a bus tour.
It's not a caravan.
Yeah, exactly. So that intimate experience needs to translate back into the camp. And when you're staying at a big corporate hotel chain, the staff have a big manual that they have to abide by. Whereas when you're staying at a private camp, they're given a lot more freedom to be themselves. And that's when you start to understand a little bit more about the culture of Africa and what it was like growing up in Africa. So yeah,
right.
Book local and try and make sure the money stays in the country and goes towards conservation and community.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So great. That was a serious question. I wasn't necessarily planning on asking it, but I think it's helpful when people are trying to discern who are they going to pick, who are they going to look at. I want them to be consciously aware of some of the things that if they really care about the animals, and this is why they're going, they can actually help by picking a operator who gives back to the employees, the employer, the local employment. That's what I was looking for. Okay. So now
sorry, Lydia. I think, something else that not a lot of people know about is there's often quite a few chains in the link between the guest and the end product. Especially, if you're booking through a travel agent that's maybe not specialized in a safari, they're relying on somebody else to give them their information and then make all the bookings and things like that. So there's often quite a few links in that chain before you actually end up on your safari. And obviously the more links in a chain, the more chances there is of something breaking and going wrong.
Slipping through the cracks.
Try and cut down on the number of links in the chain. We work directly with each property. And so it's the guest, me, and the property. So we try and cut out that sort of problem.
Yeah, that middleman, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Like more than one middleman.
Yes.
Several
Yes.
middlemen.
Exactly.
So good. Okay. Do you think that we covered about that serious topic? Do you think we've touched on everything that people need to be considered? We talked about local experience, reviews, being responsible, sustainable. What are any other pieces? Short cycle for how many hands touch an opportunity. Keep it intimate because every
Yep.
safari's an intimate scenario. That's all the serious stuff. Is there any other serious stuff before we start digging into? Let's get the audience excited about taking one of these safaris next, because I'm going to ask you questions about the safaris.
Okay.
So
I think something that potentially a serious topic is the cost of a safari, and I think a lot of people underestimate the cost of a safari and don't necessarily understand why it costs so much. So on
all
average,
the cost involved in the
yes.
safari, right? Whose
So
hands are in it, right?
we did a comparison. Actually, the place behind me here in Okavango Delta, it's the Cylinder Reserve in Botswana. It's several 100,000 hectares of pure wilderness. I think there's only 44 tourist beds that has access to all of that. When we compared that to New York, it would mean that we would only allow 22 tourists into the whole of New York City at any one time. So when you're paying for your safari, you're paying for that exclusivity. You're paying to go on a game drive like what's happening behind you and not have to fight everybody else to get that viewing. It's not great for the guests, and it's not great for the wildlife if you have hundreds of vehicles chasing these animals around. So the true safari is being out in these wilderness places and not harassing the animals, having the exclusivity of being able to enjoy the sightings. But that does come at a cost. The staff of the camps, you have to have your mechanics, your waiters, your chefs, your cleaning staff all have to be on site because you're so remote. They have to have a staff village. The supplies have to be flown in or driven in, and it often takes days to get there. You can't just pop to the corner shop and buy some eggs because you've run out of eggs. You're in the middle of nowhere. And I think a lot of people underestimate the cost of a safari and why it costs so much. Yeah. And then on top of that, the cost of conserving all of this. You've got anti-poaching patrols that go out, all that sort of stuff, which all needs to be kind of incorporated within the cost of the safari experience.
Yeah. It kind of, the analogy I feel like is coming to mind, it's like to help people visualize, like it's a small, boat, yacht experience versus a large cruise ship experience where there's thousands of people on. Correct. And you're still floating in the same ocean, right? Yep. But are you on a small yacht with 6 other guests, or are you with thousands of other guests? So that makes a lot of sense. And so exclusivity, intimacy, there are expenses to flying in your food for the night, so you're paying for the opportunity to go where the animals are and not have those animals be stressed out because there's too many people and they're not acting normal. We want to be able to go see how they act in their own environment, right? So you're just a fly on the wall in this case, right? A small fly. Okay, correct. Good. That's all good things to think about. Now, so we know you offer an amazing experience. Now let's talk about some of those experiences just to help people. Like, if you've never even considered a safari, this conversation we're about to dive into might get you excited about calling Stanley Safaris and seeing what's possible for you. So I want to ask first, I saw on your website, the Seychelles. Can you tell me about your trip to the Seychelles? What is that like? Is that near Madagascar?
Yeah, it's just north from Madagascar. Okay. And yeah, it's amazing. It's your typical tropical beach destination. Powder white sandy beaches, turquoise waters. But what makes the Seychelles different are those granite boulders on the beach, which makes it really picturesque. So there's a particular beach on Ladigue Island that is the most photographed beach on Instagram. So everybody goes there to take their photos. But yeah, it really is. It's an amazing destination. We typically use it as a relaxing stop at the end of a safari.
Okay.
So we'll do the safari in South Africa or Tanzania or Kenya or something like that, and then go and do a few days relaxing on the beach in the Seychelles. And yeah, lots of different beaches and islands to choose from. I think there's 115 islands in the Seychelles, so you've got lots of choice there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was lucky to do it with my family a couple of years ago now, and we did the 3 main islands, and then we went off to Alphonse Island, which is a private island. It's about an hour's flight into the middle of nowhere, and the snorkeling, the experiences we had there was just incredible, absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Typically, I'm not a beach person. I'm not the type of person to sit on a beach and do nothing.
Lay around.
Yeah, that's not me. I need things to do. And with the snorkeling and the boat trips and the sandbank lunches and going looking for manta rays and dolphins and all that was incredible. Yeah, we
I bet
never
the
sat still at
wildlife's
all.
incredible there.
Yeah.
The underwater wildlife. Okay, so
Yeah.
the next one I'm curious about is the Congo, because everybody knows about the gorillas of the Congo. So tell us a little bit about the Congo.
So the Congo is, and we need to be careful here. There's 2 Congos. You've got the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and you've got the Republic of Congo. And everybody has quite a negative mental image about the Congo, and they just group them together because of the wars and things that have been going on. That is typically the Democratic Republic of Congo. We send people to the Republic of Congo, Brazzaville, which is completely safe, and it's an amazing experience to go out into Odzala National Park, and you go and you track the lowland gorillas there. So you've got your mountain gorillas in Uganda and Rwanda, and then you've got your lowland gorillas down in the Congo rainforest. It's quite an adventurous trip. It's very remote. There's only a couple of properties there.
Lots of walking.
Lots of walking, canoeing, boating, going and sitting in the bays and these open clearings and watching the forest elephants and forest buffalo and things like that come down. And then you get the opportunity to go and track the lowland gorillas, and you spend 1 hour with them. They're completely habituated, so they're very relaxed around people. And just seeing gorillas in their natural habitat is mind blowing. Looking into their eyes, and they look back at you, and you can see that connection. You can feel it. It's an amazing experience. I'm fortunate. I've been invited to the Congo in November. Very, very excited to be going and seeing it and experiencing it. So I'll keep you posted.
Well, yes. And if you want to come back just for a conversation about the Congo, I'd love to have you on. So, you know what, just sounds like the kind of experience you want to have in your lifetime, like a lifetime experience of getting close with the gorillas. I mean, I love monkeys. And I mean, I know gorillas are apes, but I'm just saying I like all kinds of apes and monkeys and all that stuff. They're very smart, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So a couple questions I have are, what would you consider like your most popular thing that gets requested, or that you recommend? Like if someone only has one trip in their lifetime to go experience Africa, like what would you recommend that they do?
It's a very difficult question to answer. It's very open-ended. Africa is every country is completely different. But if you had one trip to Africa,
let me add something.
Okay.
No expense spared, like the one trip that anyone could have, no limit on what you spend. Okay. So give us like the perfect experience with you, no limits on money.
Typically, for a first timer, I would start the conversation around South Africa or Tanzania. South Africa, from the point of view that it has a lot of variety. You've got Cape Town, you've got the winelands. It's a really nice, easy way to come into Africa and kind of get started. Then you've got the Sabi Sands, Timbavati, and other safari areas around South Africa. Very comfortable accommodation. And I think for people that are a little bit nervous about Africa, South Africa is a really safe bet in that sense. Some of the other countries, Tanzania and Botswana, Zimbabwe, your camps are out in the wilderness. There's no fences often, so you often have animals coming through the camp. Whereas in South Africa, it's a little bit more safer. You've got proper lodges, fencing around. So the animals stay on their side and you stay on your side, and then you go and do your safari. So I think for someone that's maybe a little bit nervous, South Africa is generally a very good bet to come for the first time. And then Tanzania, just from the pure point that you're going to see so much wildlife. The migration is happening throughout the year. You're going to be in amongst 3 million wildebeest and zebras. They're crossing rivers and all sorts of exciting things like that. And you've got the variety in Tanzania. You've got some open areas, you've got grasslands, you've got the Ngoro Crater. You can do amazing cultural experiences in Tanzania. And then you can combine that with the beaches. There's some amazing islands off the coast of Tanzania as well. So Tanzania is one of those, tick off the boxes, one destination, and you get to do everything. If it were me on my trip,
With all the years experience you have.
Yeah, it's difficult. I've got a very soft spot for Zambia. Zambia it's one of those countries that doesn't get a lot of publicity. It doesn't have a very big marketing budget. And so it's not as well known, but it kind of fits me perfectly. It's small privately owned camps and often privately run camps, so owner-run camps, amazing guiding and incredible experiences. You've got canoeing, you've got your game drives, and then you do a lot of walking safaris. And I love walking safaris. For me, it's one of the best ways to experience Africa, to be on foot, tracking animals, understanding the signs that they've left behind, learning a little bit more about the medicinal uses of plants from the guide and things like that. It's a very educational experience, and you see things that you typically miss when you're in a vehicle. So for me, a walking safari is the ultimate way to experience Africa, and Zambia is all about walking safaris. Botswana behind me, just the sheer size of the concessions in the wilderness there, and it's completely untouched. It makes it a very special experience, a very special destination. I go back as often as I can. I was in Botswana twice last year. So every opportunity I get, I go into Botswana, and I love the freedom that you get there, the ability to drive for miles and miles and miles, not see anybody else, have the incredible sightings to yourself. But what makes Botswana quite cool as well is you can do a very rustic camp on an island, where it was like what I did when I was growing up. When I was 12, we camped on an island in the middle of the Okavango Delta with my parents. We didn't have a guide. We didn't have a rifle. We went looking for elephants on foot. And after about 4 or 5 hours of tracking them, we came across them. Luckily, they ran one way, we ran the other way. And Botswana offers the ability to be able to do a similar experience to that, but obviously in a much more comfortable and safe way. So combining that with a nice luxury camp and getting that experience is amazing. And then the other thing I really love is helicopters. I always wanted to be a helicopter pilot when I was a child. And so I try and incorporate helicopters into experiences as much as possible. So in Kenya and Tanzania, and again in Botswana, we can offer some amazing helicopter experiences into extremely remote areas that you can't get to otherwise. In Botswana, you go and land on an island. You can have a champagne stop or a picnic on this island in the middle of nowhere, only accessible by helicopter. In Kenya, we can organize picnic breakfasts around Mount Kenya, the very top of Mount Kenya. There's some alpine lakes and things like that up there. You could fly up there and have a breakfast and then continue exploring around. So yeah, I think for me, a combination of walking, helicopters, and then if time allowed, I would end off in the Seychelles on a nice beach, snorkeling with manta rays.
That's awesome. Okay, what comes to mind next is, what is the ideal client for you? Like, I saw on your website that you can do like a honeymoon, which is obviously like 2 people safaris all the way up to, what would you say with your network of lodges and what have you? Like, what's the maximum number of people that is ideal for one trip together, to combine? So, because, not all lodges have,
Yeah.
80 rooms or whatever. So like if there's a corporation that wants to take its executives or its sales team or whatever, like what are those numbers for you?
So the most I've booked for at the moment is a family of 15. And I think with the lodges and that we're using for them, that's a nice size. They're going up into Kenya, and we've got private houses for them, so they've got the whole house to themselves. And yeah, that's amazing. I think when you have that private house for yourself and your family, it just gives you so much more freedom and flexibility, and you feel completely at home. You're not sharing it with anybody else. So I'd say, 12 to 15 is probably a comfortable maximum. Anything more than that, there are properties, we would then take over a whole safari camp. And typically your safari camps have between 6 and 12 tents. So we could do up to 24, sometimes more. I've had a request for a honeymoon, or wedding kind of party. It was about 60 odd guests. And there we just combined different properties together that were in the same area.
Okay.
And we managed to make that work. So yeah, we can make things work. But I'd say typically your honeymooners, amazing. Coming and spending your honeymoon in Africa, the bucket list sort of destination, and spending that together as your first trip as a married couple. A bit of adventure, amazing food, attentive service, and then going and spending time relaxing on the beach at the end. And then I love families. When you get a family together and the kids, getting to experience this, it's mind blowing.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd say 12 to 15 probably is a comfortable maximum.
Okay. So what else comes to mind now is, for those who are addicted to their cell phones, let's talk about when you go on these trips. I think you know where my question is going. When we go into the remote reaches of Africa or Tanzania or Botswana, when we go to these lodges, do we have cellular access, or is that something you just knock off the table, that you're leaving the world of the internet? Like, help us understand, what do we really have to get prepared for?
So I wish it was leaving the world behind and kind of focusing in on where you are. But nowadays people need to be connected. So most of the lodges, not all of them, most of them will have some form of satellite internet, Wi-Fi. It varies. Some of them will only have it in the main area. Some of them will only have it in the rooms. But given the remoteness of these destinations, of these camps and lodges, it's not the sort of thing that you'd be able to do a Zoom call or something like that. It's to send WhatsApps, maybe send a couple of pictures, upload a couple of pictures on Instagram of where you are and what you're seeing. But it's not the sort of thing where you're going to sit and stream Netflix videos.
Yeah, don't plan on working when you come to the safari, right?
Exactly. And I think, I used to work for a camp operator, and we were always battling between ourselves whether we should introduce internet or not within the camps, because, we're quite purist in that sense, or I am, and a few of us at that point were as well, in that this is, the scenes behind us. That's what you should be enjoying,
Right. The
not glued behind
off-grid.
your screen. But we get a lot of CEOs traveling. They need to be connected, or you've got family members that are traveling and someone's sick back home. They need to have that connection. So it is important nowadays to have that Wi-Fi in a few of the camps. But just don't be prepared for 100 meg download or more. It's quite slow and can be quite frustrating.
Right. Well, and the whole point is to get away, right? To be able to unplug and to get away and
Correct.
enjoy life before internet, right? We
Correct.
know. I think you're old enough. You actually know what that life was like.
Yes.
Me
Indeed.
too. Me too.
Yeah.
Half of my life was before internet, and what do I say? I say BI and AI. After internet and before internet.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
so
we used a slogan in a previous job where it was, disconnect to reconnect. When you've got these families traveling together, and maybe dad is a CEO and mom's an executive, and they're so busy at work, and kids are at school and boarding school and things like that, and coming together on this experience, you do need to disconnect to reconnect. So I think that's quite a strong value. And I think when people get there, their mindset is, I'm going to be disconnected. I'm not going to have, access to internet and things like that. It does freak them out. But when they get there, it takes a day or two, and then they realize why, and they understand. And you can see that, that release and relax,
yeah,
and then start enjoying the experience. So, yeah, I
that's
wish
good.
it was more of it, but people do need to stay connected for various reasons.
I just like to ask the questions people are going to want to know, so that's why I asked.
Hmm.
All right. So, of the things that we've talked about, are there any other safari style experiences that you want to take this time to tell us about that I didn't ask you about? Or do you think we covered them all? Was it before we hit the record button that you were saying most people like to come to Africa to see the big five? I think we talked about that before we hit the
Yeah.
record button. So do you want to bring that conversation to the listener and then tell us why, the
Mm.
other?
So when a lot of people think of Africa, they think of the wildlife, they think of the big five, and coming in and ticking, those boxes. But there's so much more to Africa than just that. The landscapes are incredible. We've got everything from the jungles of the Congo and Rwanda and Uganda, Madagascar. We've got the big open grassy plains of the Serengeti. We've got the wetlands of the Okavango Delta in Botswana. And then we've got incredible deserts in Namibia. The Namib Desert is just completely barren. So we've got so much to offer in terms of landscape. And then the people are amazing. They're so welcoming. And you need to get to know them. You need to interact with the staff at the camps. I hear it so often where guests have been staying in a particular camp and they've stayed there for 3 nights. And when they go to leave, they're crying because they've built up such a strong bond with the staff in the camp. Because it goes back to that whole intimate experience of seeing the wildlife for the first time and being in this incredible landscape, and engaging with the people. So I try and encourage my guests is, yes, go and see the wildlife, but try and do as many experiences as you can: the walking, the helicopters, the canoeing, and get to know the people. It's very important. And when you start talking to the staff in the camps, especially if they come from the local villages, and a lot of the guides and the staff in the camps come from the village down the road, and you start understanding what it was like for them growing up in this sort of environment, and how they had to walk 10, 15, 20 miles in the morning to go to school, and then back again in the evening, or they have to walk 5 miles to go and collect water and things like that. You can start to understand a little bit more about the culture and the life in Africa. And that, for me, it's very, very important. So yes, see your wildlife. It's amazing, and you will never forget that. But dig deeper, get a little bit more under the skin of the country that you're visiting, and speak to the people and get to know a little bit more about who they are.
Okay. I know like probably 50% of the population knows what the big five are, but will you tell us, for the audience who doesn't know what those big five are,
Sure.
that they should be looking for?
So your big five are your lion, your leopard, elephant, buffalo, and then your rhino. It basically goes back to the hunting days, and those were the 5 most dangerous animals to hunt. So that's why they were at the top of the list of a lot of hunters to come out to Africa and shoot those animals, because they were the most dangerous. It's now kind of pulled through into the photographic safari industry, and that term, the big five, has stuck because they're synonymous with being the most dangerous.
It makes me so sad to see people bragging with their elephant head that they shot. I mean, why is that even allowed in the country? They're not growing, they're not making babies fast enough for the hunters. Why is that even legal to kill an animal like that?
that's a whole new discussion. We could go on for hours about that. You know, the hunters see themselves as conservationists because they local employment, the meat they harvesting is going back into the local communities and things like that. But the reality is it's not like that at all.
I mean, it's not keeping up. The production of the animals isn't keeping up with the killing, is it?
Yeah, no. From a hunting point of view, the professional hunting point of view, it is a little bit. It's quite regulated in terms of the number of
allowing
specific
how
animals
many
that can be hunted every year
Okay.
in specific areas. So there is a lot of science behind it, where they look at
Okay.
the holding capacity of an area, and then they go, okay, we can take 5 elephants from this area in that year.
Like thinning them out or whatever.
Yeah, but the reality is that again, when a hunter is meant to go in and shoot something, he's meant to shoot the oldest animal that's been kicked out of the herd, that's no longer breeding. But when you've got somebody that's paying $50,000 to shoot an elephant, he wants the best elephants, and the best elephants are the ones that are in their prime in breeding. And so the reality is that the best animals actually end up getting shot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we all know the story of Cecil the lion that was shot by the dentist in Zimbabwe. I was actually fortunate to see Cecil a couple of months before that happened. And what a lot of people don't understand about the hunting industry is that Cecil had, there were 2 male lions that were in charge of a pride. They had 6 very young cubs. And typically what happens is, if a male lion is removed from that family environment, other male lions move in and they will kill any cub that is under the age of 2 years old. And that gets the breeding cycle of the females going again a lot quicker, so that they can start producing young a lot quicker. And so Cecil was in charge of, in his pride, he had 6 females and 6 cubs. And I think the cubs were only a couple of months old. And so he got shot. He got taken out of that ecosystem. His brother, that was also part of the pride, was now only half. When you have 2 lions, they're a lot stronger to fend off other males. Now there was only 1 male. So now bigger prides of males were coming in. And so he ran away and he left the 6 females and the 6 cubs to fend for themselves. I went back to Wangi, I think a couple of months, 6 months after Cecil had been shot. And the guides were just distraught. They hadn't seen the 6 cubs for about a week. They'd seen the tracks leading off somewhere. And then they knew that there were other male lions in that particular area, and they hadn't seen the cubs for a week. And so they just thought they'd been killed. And we were out on a game drive and we came back. And as we were driving back into camp, we bumped into the females with the 6 cubs. And the guides were in tears. They were just so excited that they had survived. But these females it's an amazing survival story, because as soon as they knew other males were coming into the area, they took the cubs and they ran to the other side of the territory, and they just kept moving away and stopping any other males from coming in and killing those cubs until they got to about 2 years old, when they were safe. So, in this case, it was a success story, but it could very well have meant that Cecil gets shot, his brother gets kicked out of the pride, and those 6 cubs get killed as well. So it's not just the 1 lion that gets killed in the end. It could have been 8.
Did anything happen to that dentist? I mean, was he in the wrong or whatever?
I don't know. I don't know what happened.
I don't want to turn your podcast into that is story, but what a wonderful outcome. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but we need to bring the awareness so that people can know why they want to pick the right type of tour for them.
Correct.
So that's good. All right. Finally, and wrapping up, I do want to ask you, when you go to these places, the lodges, do they feed you like local traditional foods, or do they feed you typical foods that they think their clients want to eat? Like, what is the dining experience when you go to these lodges?
So it's evolved quite a lot over the last few years. In the past, safaris were synonymous with just eating. You'd wake up, you'd eat, you'd go on a game drive, you would eat some more, you'd come back to the lodge, you would eat some more, you'd have a bit of a rest, you'd eat some more, go on another game driving, and it's just continuously eating. And it was kind of more
too much eating.
It was you eating all the time, and then you're sitting in a game drive vehicle, so there's very little exercise. And so we used to hear it time and time again that it's too much food and not enough exercise. So the food on safari has evolved quite a lot. It's a lot fresher. It's a lot lighter.
Lighter, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's typical African food, but what would generally happen is a lot of these camps and lodges would put on a traditional night. Maybe every third night, they would put on a traditional night where it's then more traditional food, your sadza, mealie meal, a lot of meat cooked on the fire, and that sort of stuff. So people do get to experience a little bit more of the local cuisine and food. It's often eaten outside in a boma, so you're under the stars. There's fires around, and it's quite a romantic sort of setting, and enjoying the fire, the song. The staff often then just come in and start singing and dancing, and it's quite an incredible experience. So yeah, nice, light, healthy food, and then at least once during a stay, they'll get a traditional evening as well.
It sounds like these are so small that you're like family. When you come to stay, they're almost like treating you like come into our home, and we sit around and play instruments at night to entertain ourselves, and you get to enjoy that experience, right?
Exactly. It's exactly like that.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. Is there anything that you want to say in wrapping up that maybe I didn't even know I should be asking you the questions? Asking you hard questions.
Yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot. Africa it's a very exciting destination. It's unlike anything else in the world. And I wish more people could come and experience it. We are very busy. It seems to be the hot destination at the moment, and finding availability now is quite tricky. Safari is not a lastminute.com sort of trip. You do need to plan ahead. When we were talking earlier about the families of 15, you need to be looking at 2025, 2026 if you want to be doing things like that. So plan ahead, and don't be afraid to book for 2025.
Okay. So if somebody wants to book you, how do they find you? Where are you? Like, not only your, I know you're on Instagram because you and I connected, or somebody from your company connected with my Instagram. So tell us all ways we can go be a part of your social, and where do we reach out to you if we want to ask you more questions?
Sure. So Instagram is Stanley_Safaris. I think that's it. And then the website is stanley-safaris.com. You can go on there, and then our contact details, email address, all of that sort of stuff is on there. You can send an inquiry form through, and then I would get that and then set up a call. I'm very active on WhatsApp. So I like to use WhatsApp just to throw a couple of questions backwards and forwards, and then schedule a call from there. So best way is to go onto the website, send through an inquiry, and then from there we start the fun part of planning, because it really is a fun part, starting to talk about it and start to come up with some ideas. So that's the best way.
That's awesome. It sounds like from our conversation, you're just providing an amazing service for people. And again, I'll just reiterate, a custom tailored service for people, right? So I thank you. I thank you for being on the Global Travel Junkie podcast today. And I hope that lots of people find your video and find a way to experience Africa in all of its beauty, right?
Yeah, this has been really fun. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, hang in there, and we'll say goodbye to our guest right now. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.